You know I can't count that high, Doc. Look, I've only got so
You
many
can count
fingers and
to
toes.
17. You have that many digits.
But you had like 60s and 80s and stuff. The numbers were out there. Like, I'm not even convinced 80 is a real number, by the way. That might be a government conspiracy. Like, those numbers up there, like, they get a little, I don't know. I mean, have you ever seen 80 things? Like, no. That's like saying 100 people attend Dragon Con. Psst, there's only like 10. Enjoy your hot chocolate, and we'll get started. I see what you're doing there.
Your math, your scientific notation numbers are really bad.
I mean, hand-wavium is a thing, Doc. Hand-wavium is a thing. All right, so hey, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans, it's time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. Just three nerdy veterans geeking out over science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies. A place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. So without further ado, before we let you introduce yourself, Andy, I have to ask, are you another one of her plants? She's bringing in ringers lately that are like scientists and stuff. Are you one of those?
No. He says convincingly.
With a very big question mark.
Because, like I was doing, and she's like, oh, I'm a microbiologist. I'm like, that's not real.
Yeah.
No, unfortunately, I have zero nerd credential. Well, no, zero official nerd credential. Plenty of nerd credential, but nothing to back it up, essentially.
But that's you did stay at Holiday Inn Express the other night, so that counts.
There you go. Exactly.
Fair. Stop stalking the guests.
Wait, that's not allowed?
There's a certain level of background research that's fine after a certain level, like where they slept, what hotel they stayed at. You're crossing.
Why didn't you tell me that before? Maybe if you had told me that, I wouldn't have gotten that restraining order from Elon Musk. All right?
I did tell you, you just didn't listen. It's that brain damage thing.
What? Speaking to my good ear. All right. You introduce yourself to our audience.
So, I'm Andy Peloquin, author of Dark Epic Fantasy, Epic Dark Fantasy, whichever order you want to put it in. A little bit of military / cyberpunk sci-fi just for the heck of it. Yeah, that's pretty much all the interesting things about me. We can pretty much end here, I think.
All right, well, that was the show, guys. That's a wrap.
He wants to tell us about his book.
Oh, okay. We'll stick around and talk about Dark Fantasy.
Fair enough.
So the second part of the introduction, dear listener, as we do, because we always do, is how we first found them. And this is yet another slate where Doc scheduled and she said, be here and do this thing or I will stab you. So here I am, unstabbed. How did you find him, Doc?
I found him because a mutual friend of ours, Bryce O'Connor, recommended him and said, hey, look, this guy would be good to have. And he emailed me. And so a match made in email.
Works for me. It's probably one of like a handful that wasn't, we met at a bar. So, I mean, that's progress, Doc.
We can meet at a bar. We'll meet at a bar in person one day.
100%. That's all the best things happen at bars.
Pretty much.
I think she goes to a bar and just calls it a convention so it sounds less alcoholic.
I don't go to meetings.
Convention of stuff. All right, Doc, we get to ask him the religion questions.
Notice I'm not denying. Okay, so if you had to pick one, which one would it be? Aliens, Terminator, or RoboCop?
T2.
Very specific. Terminator 2. Okay. Now, because we're polytheistic and we love our fantasy, Beastmaster, Witcher, or Excalibur?
I actually had to think about that one for a minute because Excalibur is it's so classical fantasy.
It is amazing.
But I cannot help but love the grumpy, monosyllabic grunting response badass that is The Witcher. Like that was like I was hooked from minute one.
You know what? I will admit I watched The Witcher, and The Witcher was the first time I really believed that Henry Cavill could act as well as my brother kept telling me he could. And
Straight up.
Whoa. Now,
he did amazing as Superman for Superman. You don't really need a massive amount of depth to be Superman. It's just kind of there.
Yeah.
He did okay in the one, I think it's called The Man from Steel, I believe it's called.
Man of Steel. Yeah.
He was fine in his original role in Count of Monte Cristo when he was a teenager, but 100% The Witcher. I think The Witcher cemented him as in a way, king of the nerds as much as Jason Momoa.
No, admittedly, honestly, what really cemented him as a god of geeky nerddom was the fact that his COVID hobby was painting Warhammer 40K.
And building computers topless.
And building computers. And I'm like, hi, I love you.
You gonna be okay, Doc? Do you need a moment?
So,
all right, just checking.
Okay, my computer froze for a second.
No, I know, but you just were getting all gushy about The Witcher, so I just wanted to make sure you were okay. You didn't need some private time.
Henry Cavill is amazing. That's all I have to say.
I mean, kind of thing.
He's very happily in a relationship, but
not with you, right? Sadly for him.
I would not be on this podcast if I was in a relationship. Probably with him.
All of us, I think.
There you go.
I like that as well. We're going with that one. So
we'll do with that.
At the Blasters and Blades podcast, we do both sci-fi and fantasy. But which one was your first love, sci-fi or fantasy?
I actually thought about that question. I feel like the Chronicles of Narnia was kind of my first taste of the speculative fiction genre, but I don't think I really fell in love until I went from... So Sherlock Holmes was a birthday present that I got on my 10th birthday. I devoured the entire volume in
just a lot of heavy reading for 10.
I loved that shit. And then I went from there to Tarzan because it's logical progression. And then from Tarzan to John Carter of Mars. And it was everything I wanted. It was sword fights. It was, spaceship and ray guns and beautiful women and jumping 30 feet into the Martian air. And I was like, oh, I am here for this. And then from John Carter, like I read every single book that I could find, and it just naturally segued into Conan. And I was hooked. So that was sort of my progression.
So have you heard about they're doing an expanded universe of Conan novels?
Yes, I heard Scott Oden did one of those novels.
No. Like Titan Publishing is doing a whole bunch.
Ooh, I'm so there. The Conan audiobooks were what got me into audiobooks. I just had a bunch of time on my hands, and I just started listening to first the original Robert Edward Howard, REH, and then L. Sprague de Camp, and I binged all of them so hard.
Yeah, they're well worth binging. So
what did you think of the since you read your first exposure was Chronicles of Narnia? Did you enjoy the TV movies that they made for it?
They were fine. I loved the childishness of the story. Like it was kind of what I was expecting. And then when they tried to make it a little bit more adult, it kind of jarred a bit. Honestly, the classic Chronicles of Narnia will always be that old cartoon with, Turkish delight and, all just the old cartoon. I don't know, I think it's from the 1950s or something. It's just amazing.
And what about the John Carter of Mars? What did you think of that movie? That was, in my opinion, poorly marketed because most people didn't realize that's what it was. But I thought for what it was good. I would have watched the sequel.
It was not my John Carter of Mars. Essentially, like I was expecting a little bit more of a more mature hero and a more mature story. It was very action adventure-y. You got the romance with Deja Thoris. It was a fun action adventure movie. But when I first read John Carter of Mars, he was like this hero dude, like this mature former soldier who is an actual hero, and he's got, the political influence, and he's dealing with monarchs or whatever the Martian equivalent was. Like it was a much more complex and mature story. Whereas Ben Barnes, no, it was Taylor Kitsch, right? Who did that one?
I don't know.
Either one of the two.
Pop culture movies.
The twins. It was an action adventure movie with nothing to sink my teeth into, and I think that's why it flopped in a way, because it had so much potential for so much more and didn't quite hit the mark.
Yeah, I think when you're dealing with iconic properties that have a lot of layers to them, like this one and Dune, you really have to take the time to do them right and to get some of those nuances, or else you end up going, unless you're very straight up, we're doing this part of it. So, because otherwise I think now more so than 10 years ago, and definitely versus like the 80s and the 90s, it really is so much more. And I think people have learned I think fans have protested enough that they've learned to listen.
Let's hope.
I hope.
So basically, what you're
You okay
describing
there
is
over there?
yeah. So basically, what you're describing is the fact that Hollywood routinely produces movies on the assumption that their audiences are morons, and then they flop because the audiences feel offended that they were treated like morons.
Well, I think it's because they don't I think in some cases they go for stuff with an existing fan base, and I think they're only now starting to realize that existing fan base is going to expect something. They're not going to take table scraps.
Yeah.
Or it's like if you go into, like, let's say with the new Wheel of Time TV show, which I'm totally stoked about.
Oh, dude, you don't want to
If
even
they-
hear my friend Jennifer about it.
If they treat this new show like they treated the Shannara TV show, and they made it like this young adult thing, and they really focused on the coming of age, almost like what is they called, Shadow Hunters or Divergent kind of flair, you're going to alienate a lot of people who are coming in expecting something more mature along the lines of, say, The Expanse, or, you know, one of these shows that are a little bit more complex, nuanced, and you know, they take their time to develop. You don't need to have everything happen in every single episode. I do think the Netflix era of TV has taught us to be patient and to wait for things to build up.
Yeah, I think part of it though also is it's a very different writing style when you know you have 6 episodes to tell a complete story arc versus how some of these newer shows, like when Supergirl aired, they aired and they had 6 episodes to prove that they were worth keeping. And then they got renewed for the series. Okay, so now we've done a complete story arc in 6 episodes. How do we expand that to the 24? Now, one thing I do miss about traditional TV is I really do like the 24 episode seasons. I'm a baby, I'm a brat, and I really do like that. But I also really like the fact that these shows are given, we know we are going to authorize you 6 episodes. Here is your budget. 8 hours of TV. Here is your budget. And I think what ends up happening is you end up with a better quality. Like if you look at Legend of Korra, they talk about it in some of the articles and the interviews afterwards. Like they did a lot of flashback episodes because they had to fill out, but they had no budget. So, so I really like that aspect. And my friend Jennifer is the con chair for Jordan Con, and it's a Wheel of Time Con. Oh, anytime. She is so hopeful, and I am sitting here going, let me know after it airs how hopeful you were, because I am the pessimist.
Oh, absolutely. But actually, I'm more of an optimist. So I'm looking at shows like, let's say, The Mandalorian or The Witcher, or shows that, or we're going to say the early seasons of Game of Thrones. Right up until season 8.5, they did an amazing job. These shows that really did take their time and develop it and give you time to sort of exist in the world, but without trying to stuff the story. Like The Witcher did an amazing thing of keeping each of the stories actually fairly sparse. You don't really see a whole bunch of the world at large. Yeah. You don't get to explore the kingdoms, but you get an amazing sense of who this guy is, only this guy. And of course, Yennefer and a little bit of Ciri. But you get these great, so you have these characters that you're just latched onto, and they keep you absolutely hooked. And then they go building out and building bigger and adding layer after layer. And that's what makes these shows successful versus like a lot of the more traditional network shows that have 24 episodes. They've got time to develop, you know, they need to develop a character over 24 episodes. So they really have to sort of play around with like the setting or whatever the show's gimmick is.
Yeah, there's a lot of intense storytelling in those tighter episodes, definitely. So
part of what the reason Hollywood, in my opinion, falls flat is what you're describing when you say they make it too juvenile when the audience and the source material was too mature. Is they're basically trying to be all things to all people, and they fall flat across the board.
Yeah,
and that's one of the first things the indie authors learn is you've got to know who your audience is and write stories that they want, because I mean it's great if you appeal to the fill in the blank demographic, but if they don't read the kind of stuff you're writing, why does it matter?
Yep, 100%.
And I think that's where Hollywood hasn't quite figured it out. I think you're starting to see some of that with the Netflix style, and I think you're seeing that with some of the indie stuff that's coming out. I mean, because Netflix
has done an amazing job with some of the things, and adapting. Some of it is what was it? The gentleman who does the Outlander series. Diana Gibbon has even said, I think that's how you pronounce it.
Gabaldon.
Yeah, I'm horrible at that. She's even said that he put stuff in there from studying what they did at the time that if she were to rewrite the book, she'd go back in and add. So you have to have a lot of respect for the property versus just viewing it as a money-making adventure.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
all right. So we talked about your first exposure, you described in books at least, was the Chronicles of Narnia. Were there any other exposures to speculative fiction, like in cartoons, board games, or anything else that you had when you were young, or was it Chronicles of Narnia was your first?
Star Wars. Yeah, I'm not young enough. I'm sorry, I'm not old enough.
Sci-fi or fantasy to you?
Oh, both. Sci-fan, 100%.
Take that, Nick Garber.
So I was not young enough to be, in the cinemas when it came out. All of 3 of the movies were released, I believe, by the time I actually got around to watching them, which means I kind of got to binge this universe where there's freaking lightsabers, right? Just the greatest thing ever.
You
and
remember
then
when Sci-Fi used to air those every Thanksgiving? That was the best Thanksgiving tradition.
Absolutely.
That was
and then
before the Sci-Fi Channel became like Ghosts and Rednecks.
You're a redneck.
Yeah, but they make like me look normal. The stuff they put on the Sci-Fi Channel, that's like definitely not science fiction. But I'm sorry, we interrupted. We were talking about Star Wars and how you're a young whippersnapper.
I was just going to say, so 2001, when The Phantom Menace came out, I still was young enough that I was just, enchanted by what was, kind of a crappy story, but lightsaber and spaceships, and oh my God, this is amazing. And the lightsaber battles in the in trilogy 1, 2, and 3 are hands down the best, like straight up.
I will admit they pulled out all the stops for those. They really did. So I definitely think Star Wars is the case. Have you seen that trend where people go back and they listen to songs that they listened to as a teenager, as an adult, and they're like, oh no. I think there is something to be said about some of those movies and books that we look at. Yeah. I recently was trying to describe Sailor Moon to JR, and I'm like, well, there's a plot hole that you could fit like the entire Galaxy's Edge universe in, but I still love it.
Yeah. Sometimes you just love stuff because you love it. Because you loved it as a kid, and it's imprinted in your brain, and you're never going to stop loving it, no matter how long.
It's going to cause a death spiral of depression if you stop loving it.
Yeah,
so that would be like G.I. Joe for me. They had worse aim than the stormtroopers. No one ever got shot. Like, if I'm going to war again, I want to go that way because, like, I would have gotten shot. Totally would have been safer. And then everyone ends laughing for some reason. So yeah, that's one of those ones that you as a kid you watch it and like, this is the most awesome stuff ever. I want all the action figures.
Yeah.
And then as a grown up, you're like, yeah, they needed better writers.
Yeah, I tried learning how to kick from watching She-Ra. That was not a good idea. How
badly did you fall on your backside?
I did not fall on my backside. I only became a klutz after I became an adult. I was totally beforehand.
So, before we embarrass her and let her humiliate herself in front of all 12 of our viewers, let's get back to you, Andy. How did you? What is it you love about speculative fiction more broadly?
So my favorite thing about speculative fiction is I can deal with anything real, and I have this layer of dissociation from the topic. I can insult any religion I want. I can insult any political system. I can insult any person, but it's set in my world and it's named something else. So I'm good. My hands are clear.
Okay, have you killed anybody that you don't have to say, this is a yes or no question. You don't have to say who the character is or who the person is. Have you ever built a character just so that based off of somebody, just so you could kill them?
Oh, 100%.
Okay.
I actually wrote a character named Jonas Alex into my world, my sci-fi world, just so I can have this bloviating blowhard come on and just rant nonsense anytime I wanted to. And it was my favorite character to write because I would literally watch YouTube videos of this person who shall not be named and whose name is not very clearly understandable based on this. And it was just like the most ridiculous things I could think of to write. I got to write them. It was amazing.
So he was your Joe Buckley. So I don't
Yeah,
know if you're familiar with Joe Buckley.
I'm not.
He at Bane, he is the most killed person ever.
That's awesome.
He was an editor for a long time, and so many people have killed him.
I have a goal in life. I want to be the Joe Buckley of my generation. I want to have J.R. Handley be killed more times in fiction than him. And I don't know that I'm going to do it. But I keep telling people, if you need somebody like, look, sign me up. J.R. Handley can die. Kill me twice, clone me, and kill me 100 more times. I'm okay with
I'm
that.
sorry, should I put you on the Ringo kill list? I could do that.
Yes.
I know the guy.
I definitely want someone to write a cloning story where they like clone 1,000 of me and then kill all 1,000 because that'll be the boost I need. You think they'll count that, Doc? I don't know how Bane counts.
I don't know how Bane counts either. I think they just kind of just roll with the fact that Joe Buckley will die.
Well, one day I'll be more than that. We'll see. Or I'll just, write books people want to read and we'll go with that instead. So, how did your love of speculative fiction as a genre transition, now we're going to talk about you, the author, into you writing stories in this space?
I mean, I feel like it's kind of a natural thing. I loved the marvelous and wonderful and creative and unrealistic and impossible of it all. So, of course, I would have to start writing those kind of things because my brain is like, it's like I love puzzles. So it's like if I can make something absolutely insane, totally believable, I am all over that. And of course, I'm super independent and I don't like people telling me what to do. So it's like, I can't, get through Los Angeles traffic in an hour to save my heroine. Fine. I'm going to go do it on, fictional world that I created where no one can tell me that the traffic is bad. I like doing that. I don't like obeying other people's rules.
So here's an important one that I've had with my friend Josh Hayes and his publisher, who Josh Hayes is right, his publisher is wrong. But do you think in the future we're going to go entirely digital or will we still have paperwork?
Oh, I think paperwork is always going to be there.
Josh loves you now. You are now his favorite person. I might be able to get you on his podcast.
I think paperwork will always be there, at least at a certain level. It may just be that it's one or two things. Yeah, paperwork's always going to be
there. No, the publisher's speculation was in his sci-fi that it should be digital, like that they wouldn't actually print out paperwork. And that's been a running joke in anybody that works for the government. They've been going paperless for so long, but still 2 decades later, they still haven't.
I think there will always be key pieces of paper, at least, that will always have to be physical,
or some new low tech
version of paper.
Exactly. Something that cannot be corrupted externally, aside from destroyed by fire or water or whatever, but something that is just so simple that it's accessible to everybody, versus something that requires some technology that can be something that can be compromised, something that can be shut down, all of that.
That's fair. And that's one of the things that they're wrestling with as the historian in me comes out, is when everything is digital, like how do you preserve that for posterity's sake in a pure form that isn't altered? I mean, we already have a point where like some of our founding fathers, their sons and daughters literally burned letters that they thought didn't put their parents in a good light. And when it's digital, like it's that much easier to corrupt the narrative, so to speak. So anyway, I will stop because Doc is giving me the look that says nobody cares. I like studying dead people. It's sort of my jam. And mostly because they can't disagree with me.
They do. They do.
They don't, Doc. They don't disagree with me. I'm always right when they're dead. All right.
Well,
that's what a serial killer ass.
Close to my candy comment earlier.
We're going to move on because the FBI is going to be like, is this guy a serial killer? That sounds a little creepy. So
they're going to think you're a serial killer and I'm kidnapping kids.
Yeah, I saw that comment, but we won't go there. Halloween is over. We'll just move on. So many authors let their own real life experiences influence the stories they tell. So were there any specific formidable moments that shaped you as a storyteller?
So many of them, but I think they're all just like small little things that sort of shaped the way that I perceive the world, that shaped the way that I look at things. One of the things that I have always loved is just writing things that I love into my character, because I can sort of communicate my love of these things. So in this novel, Assassin, the character, he's this, basically a Witcher-esque, monosyllabic grunting, grim, grumpy assassin guy, wears all these disguises, but he goes and he walks among what are essentially cherry blossoms, and it brings him joy, because me growing up in Japan, I love cherry blossom trees. It still is a happy memory, sense memory for me. So just things like that, little details, they're what helped me connect to the character a lot more.
Well, cherry blossoms are awesome. We had a cherry tree at one point. It didn't grow any cherries, but it had pretty blossoms.
Blossoms are worth way more than the cherries.
I know, but at like 9, I was really about the cherry because I didn't.
Fair enough.
I was so excited about having a fruit tree. So now transitioning away from some of the writing stuff and getting into some of our fandom, because I love fandom. It is literally why you have a job and we have an audience. Have you had any cool fan art or cosplay of any characters yet?
Yeah, I got actually super lucky. Was one of the admins of the Indie Fantasy Addicts group. She reached out to me. She's like, "I love the Hunter. Here's a picture of me." She dressed up as him for Halloween, and it was so cool. So cool. And then another one of my my hardcore readers, they actually made me the full assassin costume, like with the dark gray cloak and the vest and the bracers and the pants. Like so cool.
Fans, man.
I know. I got so lucky with that. I haven't gotten any fan art, unfortunately. I love fan art.
Fan cosplays count as fan art.
Absolutely,
well,
absolutely.
Can you take a picture of the cosplay they sent you that for you? Obviously, you don't want to show off fans without their permission, but if it's an actual costume that you could take a picture of that is just the outfit, in your newsletter in December, this will air in November. So that way, if they sign up for your newsletter in December, they'll be able to see what you were talking about.
Yes, I can do that.
Perfect.
I'll make a note for that.
JR is all about figuring out that angle to get people to sign up for your fan.
Well, no, because it's the one place where one you can control, and two, like if you don't have value for it, what's the point? So like I tell stories about stupid stuff I did in the army. He can show cool fan art. Yeah, I mean I didn't die, so there's that. But yeah, it's just one of those things, right? Like you got to give value to it, and so that's a perfect kind of cool way.
Am I in any of your newsletters, JR? Cisca made me do this.
No, because it's not therapy. It's newsletter, right? So you got to distinguish. Plus, my therapist actually subscribes to my newsletter, so that'd probably be bad. Yeah, we're just going to move on. Ask him the next fandom question.
Okay. Has anybody asked for your autograph out in public?
Not like outside of a convention or anything. I've had some people like come up to me at a convention and say, "Oh my God, I got your book online months ago or something, read it and loved it, and you're here." It's happened a couple of times in
That's awesome.
Vancouver, surprisingly. I've lived in British Columbia, so I did a convention at Vancouver a couple years ago, and then in Los Angeles.
Oh wow, that's really awesome though. So have you spotted anybody reading one of your books in the wild?
I haven't seen them, but so my wife works at a dental clinic, and her coworker told me, so this is going to be a little convoluted. I apologize in advance. Her coworker's boyfriend works at like this water treatment plant literally 6 hours away from here. And the boyfriend was talking with one of the people that he works with, and she was like, "Oh, I really like this author," and he started describing this person started describing this author, and this coworker's boyfriend was like, "Oh yeah, I'm friends with that guy." Like it was some random person in the middle of nowhere had read my books, and so I actually signed a book and sent it with the coworker's boyfriend to give to her. I thought it was just a really cool coincidence.
No, that is awesome. It's proof that you never know where people are.
This is a little known secret. Andy's a little humble, so he won't tell you this, but they've actually spotted moose out in the wilds of Canada reading his books. They're huge fans.
The moose population in Canada does seem to enjoy it. I don't know why.
Because they're friendly. I think. I don't know.
But anyway, that's now that you know that, we can move on. I felt like the audience needed to know. Andy,
I don't know. So I know I haven't met an unfriendly Canadian. So,
you'll come up to Canada. You'll meet a few.
I have been heard by Luke Kamekalo that they just live in the wilds of Canada, and that's why.
Yep, absolutely. You pull over on the side of the road too near their farm to check your flat tire or something. They'll come out with their shotgun. Shh, you need something?
Oh, see, I'm from the south, so that won't faze me.
That's true, but in Canada, that's like straight up assault.
Have you seen the modern version of Beverly Hillbillies?
I haven't.
So there's a scene where they're going down the highway and some wannabe gangbanger pulls a pistol on the rednecks, right? And he's like, "Oh, that's a nice one right there." And he pulls his shotgun. "This here's what I carry." That sort of would be the response in the South. They just like, they'd have this little standoff as they compare guns, and then end up drinking a beer together.
Exactly.
So what is your weirdest or funniest interaction with a fan since you started writing?
I'm always the weird one in the interactions. I make it a point to drink a lot of coffee at conventions, so weird ideas come to me. Like I have involved fans in my candy wars with people across the aisle from me at conventions, or one. Literally, you know how authors, they put bowls of candy to entice people to come and read their books. Right. So you just have a bowl of candy, and when the other person's not looking, maybe they're talking with a potential fan, you whip a candy at them. Not to hurt, obviously, but it was so much fun. And we got, other readers involved, and they started throwing candy too, or they would cover for me while I was throwing candy or distract the author who was my target. And then at another convention, this was not my fault at all. The person made the mistake. I was sitting at a table, at a dinner, sort of a party thing. And the person comes up and she leaves her backpack and says, "Could you watch this for me? Make sure no one takes anything out of it." And I was like, "Yeah, sure. What about putting stuff in?" She's like, "Whatever, dude." And so I spent the weekend with some friends, like literally by the end of the weekend, half of the convention was in on it, just sneaking garbage into her backpack, straws, soy sauce packages. She found out when she got home. We were, good friends. So she had she sent me this image, and there was literally 30 pieces of garbage. I got some people to sneak me some condoms to stick in, just anything, empty plastic water bottles. It's just this big backpack, snuck stuff in. It was amazing. And everybody else, including her best friend, was in on it. And then she got home and found it all and sent me this image. It was the best. And that's coffee's fault.
I believe it. So this is the part of the interview, Andy, where we talk about everything you have written. But it sounds like with all that caffeine, that might be a lot. So can you give us the Reader's Digest version instead?
Whew, okay, so two worlds to live in, essentially. There's this military, cyberpunky sci-fi with a former special ops sniper turned government assassin. Real, he's being handled by sort of the equivalent of the CIA. He's former special ops, but he got hit with a grenade blast that paralyzed him from the waist down. So his body is basically being moved by an AI implanted in his brain that controls kind of a Iron Man-esque, for lack of a better word, exo suit. And so it's really fun to play with this, both badass at the peak of his abilities, and then when he gets out of the armor, he's in a wheelchair. So it's just a really, really fun dynamic to play with. And then all of my fantasy stuff is set in the same world. So there's currently 4 series. There's badass half-demon assassin with the cursed dagger that drives him to kill. Young girl sold to a thieves guild that becomes, basically, it's called Queen of Thieves. It kind of explains what she's going to be. A spin-off of their sort of the young characters from both of their stories. And then a military fantasy, which is basically a modern special ops style unit with sniper, scout, medic, rifleman, captain, all of that, but sort of in this Roman legion versus Viking giant war. And it's just a ton of fun, and it's sort of that sort of ex-Umbra missions. Everything is behind the scenes. There, you see some big military battles with tens of thousands of people, and then sometimes they're just doing Black Ops shit, but it's all in this fantasy world.
Cool.
That sounds like a lot of fun. Sounds like just JR's style too.
Are there audiobooks? I asked this because I'm an ear hole, not an eyeball.
There are. The military fantasy one was recorded by Ralph Lister, which was just an absolute awesome thing for me. And then the first 3 of the military sci-fi books are also on audiobook.
All right. Well, those all sound fascinating, but today we're going to talk about Assassin, book 1 of the Darkblade series, because, that sounds bright and cheery. So where did the premise for this universe come from? How'd you come up with the idea? Was it psychedelics, Ouija board, overindulging in spiked decaf coffee?
All of the above. So
Coffee isn't a thing.
It's also a myth.
Yeah, fair enough. I loved the Night Angel series by Brent Weeks, right? The character, I didn't like the young character, but the older character, Durzo Blint, badass assassin, peak of his powers, functionally immortal. None of this training montage nonsense. It's just going out and killing people for 3 books straight. Loved that. Find out at the end of the 3rd book, there's no more. What? Horror, shock, dismay, outrage. Fine, I'm going to write my own. And so I just had to write a character who is exactly like that, you know. Obviously he became his own thing. He became much more complex thanks to Criminal Minds. There's this episode of Criminal Minds where the villain of the week, literally the only Asian American villain in the entire 13 seasons or whatever, he hears the voice of his father in his mind, and the father is always like browbeating him because he's not good enough, and the only time his father shuts up is when he kills. So light bulb moment right there. You got this demonic voice in his head. It just works.
Yeah, I know. I was like, I'm not sure that would work for my mother's voice in my head.
Yeah, and so it kind of evolved into that.
Okay, that's a little dark, and we'll try to turn it around with an even darker but more awesome cover. So can you tell us the story of this cover art? It is kind of amazing. I actually like it. So how did you get, like, what's the story of this art? Like, tell us all the details.
So I've had 3 incarnations of this book. The first one was called Blade of the Destroyer, and it looked like a heavy metal album cover. And it was just basically dark, black, red, and white. Super, super stark. It didn't really resonate with readers. They were like, I'm not sure what genre it is. So when I relaunched it in 2018, I got the photo manipulation covers, which were pretty much standard at the time. Simple, you know, darker colors, darker character, as you can see. But then recently, when I was relaunching the series to sort of, because I got to write another 6 or 7 books at the back half. So I basically collected images of all of my favorite assassin series, including the Night Angel series, Kelcade's series, the David Dalglish's Shadow Dance. And I just basically told my artist, do these, but better. And this is what he came up with. Like, and so the face, it's a little hard to tell, but the face, I always pictured Jason Momoa as the main character. Just that sort of like Jason Momoa as Khal Drogo.
I can see Jason Momoa in that as a cosplay.
Yeah. And so Jason Momoa as Khal Drogo, like, that really
get
dark,
him to stop smiling.
Yeah, exactly. Angry eyebrows, everything. And so I was like, do that. And so he did that. He shifted the features enough that it's not immediately visible as Jason Momoa, but he's got that sort of dark Khal Drogo face, which is exactly what I wanted for this guy. It's just perfect. And so the cover is just this badass weapon, this dagger with the gemstone. The gemstone lights up every time he kills someone. It absorbs the life energy of the people that he kills, and it feeds him power. And it's this voice in his head that's just kind of driving him to kill. If he doesn't kill often enough, it starts nagging at him until it becomes like a migraine headache, and eventually his head would explode. He never actually gets that far because that would be the end of the story, and that would be no fun. But
so Doc,
that's
do you see the Momoa in that?
I do see the Momoa in it. Now, maybe stop picking on me.
No, I was just asking because, you
I
see colors and I don't. So I just thought I'd zoom in real quick.
I do see the Momoa in him.
Okay. And we will stop before that gets any creepier. And you can ask question 18.
So what would your 30-second elevator pitch be for this novel?
Oh, half-demon assassin with a dagger, with a magical dagger and a voice that drives him to kill, fighting against his own inner, darker nature. Dexter in a fantasy world with a flavor of the Punisher and Wolverine.
So what is it that makes your series unique among the dark fantasy assassin series?
So a lot of the dark fantasy assassin series, like for example, Night Angel, there's this Durzo Blint character who is very similar, but the story focuses much more on the younger Kylar Stern, coming of age, training, montage, all of that. Same thing with the Shadow Dance series. It's about this young character, Aaron. And the Kelcade's series too. It's also about a younger character. They're all kind of younger because people kind of want to explore the transition into assassin, how their mind maybe changes to accept killing or things like that. But The truth is that it's way more fun to see someone who is already killing and what their psyche is like, how they are okay, how they justify it, what makes them think it's okay, or what drives them to do what they do. And that's what I wanted to explore.
So on that vein, given how you described the series, have you read Joe Abercrombie's series?
100%.
All right. So if Nine Fingers and this guy get into a fight, is your character kicking his butt or is he going down?
If Nine Fingers brings an iron sword to the fight, he's walking away victorious. Otherwise, he can cut this guy to shit, but at the end of the day, he's going to heal up, he's going to come back, and he's going to win.
So Nine Fingers is going to become like Seven Fingers at the end of this fight, is what you're saying.
And he's going to become like No Head.
Okay. All right, Doc, back to your regularly scheduled questions.
Okay. So, but I do like the fact that as much as I like a coming of age story at times, there are so many of them, sometimes I get a little bored with them.
Yep. And that's what happened to me when I started writing this one. I was like, I don't want any of that.
That, and as a person who's kind of been around, you know what? I went to basic training. I don't need to read a story about it. So, I definitely think that there is a place for people who want to read characters who are kind of already established in what they're doing, but they still have a journey to learn. And so I think that's awesome. And
sorry, the idea behind this is like if you're focused on the character development physically, the whole training montage thing, it sort of is not, it limits you to what you can actually tell, because these characters are being pushed to the limits of their physical endurance. They're also kind of discovering who they are. You see it in Evan Winter's Rage of Dragons, amazing series, but you still get that training montage scene. And pretty much every single story that has that, the character development progresses in a very similar way, which is fun when it's done right, but it's hard to come up with something fresh and unique. Whereas when your character is already at the peak of his powers, kind of like the idea behind the special ops sniper, right? He's already the biggest badass sniper in the special ops. So now who does he become when he's already physically amazing? What's his emotional development? It's a realm that you're never going to get to until you kind of become peak excellence. It's much more nuanced and complex, as opposed to developing muscles, picking up a sword for the first time and learning to fight.
This is beyond progression fantasy. This is the veteran fantasy, kind of. Does that make sense?
Exactly.
So the problem with that, Doc, is that if you start every story where they're already at their peak power, you artificially cap how far you can go.
Or you could just do like The Witcher.
Yeah, but I mean,
you find creative ways to challenge them.
You can still have character development while being at your physical prime.
But the other part of that they don't factor in, and as someone who studied dead people who never tell me I am wrong, Doc, I'm never wrong to them. Okay,
you're always wrong.
One thing that is often left out is, unless you're like the rank and file militia, and even then, most of what they're fighting with were spears that don't take as much skill. And I know all the HEMA people are going to go nuts, but comparatively speaking, there wouldn't be that boot camp type scene because they would have grown up doing it. It wouldn't be something that suddenly you're 18 and here's a sword and whatever.
Yeah, but that's what people write, though. 9 times out of 10, that is what people write. Is like military a montage, academy, or boot camp thing. And
there's a reason for that. It makes sense if you think of. Go ahead. You're going to interrupt me anyway, so do it. Go.
But also, if you're getting into some of the fantasy, is one of the things that people always forget when we're writing fantasy versus history, since you want to be historical, is the fact that the human lifespan is such that adults in historically, like in the history and time period where swords were common, an adult age of maturity was reached much earlier than it is now. So once again, like that coming of age story that as much as I love them, they're really great. They're based on a Renaissance world. Okay, yeah, they wouldn't be doing that at 18. They'd be doing that at like 13 or 12. Yeah. So, I mean, there's a certain level of that issue with it. And believe me, I'll have this argument all day long with the people who want to say that, well, YA has to be a teenager.
Yeah, so. And there is some of that. But the other part of that is when you're doing with military environments, it sort of makes sense. Recruit, private, corporal. Like the rank structure as a progression just sort of fits. And if you start where they're already a lieutenant commander and a ship's captain, looking at you, David Weber, at a certain point in time, they're not involved in all of the action. Like
No,
they're going
I
to be on
get
the
it.
bridge, bridging. And
I get
commanding
it.
and doing
I told David one of my favorite reasons for the Born in Fury saga is the fact that she actually starts as a private and spends most of the first book as enlisted. It's like, and I once had somebody who very mistakenly informed me that you can't have good enlisted. A series cannot be based around an enlisted character because it wouldn't be interesting.
They're officers, weren't they?
No, they were civilians. They were even worse.
Oh, even worse.
Oh,
All right. So
I don't get me wrong. We love civilians. I will gladly die for my civilian counterparts when I was in the service. However,
well, not gladly, but
well, not gladly. I don't know. I met my ex.
Fair. That's valid. That's valid.
However, having said that, civilians who try to tell veterans how it is really just need to stop. And we'll just leave it like that because this is a family friendly show.
But so I get to a point, but I think where a training montage really works well is if you're dealing with a magic wielder type character, because then you can artificially cap that. Well, when do they come into their power? If their power doesn't hit till X birthday, you've artificially created a situation where they couldn't have trained early. But it makes sense why they would do it. I get that. And we got sidetracked talking about the larger field of fantasy and sci-fi and all of that stuff when we should be talking about Darkblade. So, Doc, I don't know what question we were on, but get us back on track.
I was going to ask him, what tropes does he hit best with this series?
Oh, that's a tough one.
Let's just focus on the first book then.
Well, that's tough.
What tropes do you think you either hit best or that you've taken in and you've tweaked and twisted and turned around?
So the lone wolf trope, which is the Witcher, the Mandalorian, the Waylander, all of these sort of lone wolf type characters, that's a really fun one for me to write, and that's exactly who this character is. But then there's this little window to his humanity. There's this little girl that he saved from dying when she was an infant in the middle of winter, and that's sort of his one link to being human. He actively goes and seeks her out, and that's sort of a fun way to it's sort of like how in The Witcher, especially the TV show, Ciri goes and finds him. So I don't know if that's a spoiler for anybody, but
I think at this point the spoiler warning's been expired.
Exactly. He falls into it. He falls into this role of protector and caretaker, which is the most common trope. Whereas,
I love it. He doesn't so much fall into it; he kind of lands screaming and kicking into it.
Exactly.
And I think that is adorable.
Yeah, and it happened in Waylander too. Waylander kind of stumbles across this group of people, and this is the opening scene of book 1, so I'm not spoiling anything. And he kind of just adopts them as his, protectees. But I wanted to be a bit more intentional with this one because it went into the research behind the psychology of assassins, what drives them to kill, what motivates them, where their limits are, all of that. So it's kind of the intentional steering away from the full lone wolf thing. He's not actually alone, which in truth, no lone wolf ever really is. They just think they are. The evil creatures, the evil maniacal, not mustache twisting. There is no mustaches being twisted, but they're pretty standard gloaty, maniacal villains. I like that kind of thing sometimes.
So did you, when you wrote your fantasy-esque world, did you go with the Roman Saxon style of facial hair, or did you go full Viking where it's like wrapping around their ankles as they walk? How'd you portray that, since we talked about mustache twirling?
What the fuck?
I think I stuck with the more
family-friendly show.
I kind of pictured 16th century Paris or Prague.
Okay.
So that was kind of the vibe that I was going for. I really had fun giving all the noblemen just terribly colored outfits. Like, gray and green and purple and just super gaudy.
That was standard in that era, though.
Exactly. So much fun.
It's not as impactful, Doc, if he says we didn't have any mustache twirling if nobody had mustaches. That's all I'm saying.
Oh, there's plenty of mustaches. Lots and lots of them. Just no one twirled them.
JR just is fascinated by mustaches because he couldn't grow one when he was in the army.
Yeah, it looked like a caterpillar. And then when I tried to save it, because I had one of those, if you've seen, what was that? that movie they did about the Marines in Iraq.
Hurt Locker?
Not Hurt Locker. It's followed an actual unit. But anyway, that sergeant that was like talking about mustache hairs, like I had one of those sergeants. So he made me shave, and then I did that half tired, and then I had the Charlie Chaplin mustache. And if you know what that looks like, you know who else had that mustache. And I'm like, nope, I'm shaving it. That was the
Charlie
end of my
Chaplin.
foyer. That was my end of my foyer into mustache hair. It ended badly. I was scarred for life.
Mustaches do not work. Every single one of them looks yeah, they don't work.
I mean, if I could have pulled off the handlebar mustache like Dave Robinson, oh my God,
he doesn't pull it off. Either go beard or go no hair.
Doc, I think I might have to mute you. You take that back.
No.
All right. So, what subgenres do you think this hits best? Doc is done. We fired her. I'm docking your pay. You know what? Half pay for you today, Doc.
I'll just tell your mother. She'll reinstate it.
Oh, that's cheating.
She likes me better than you.
This is true, but that's why it's cheating. All right. So what subgenres do you have in this Assassin, the first book of the Darkblade series?
It probably fits either epic fantasy or dark fantasy because it hits a lot of the horror-y themes. You've got, creatures of the abyss kind of thing, a lot of darkness, a lot of horror. Like if you watch Doctor Who and you stop looking at it sci-fi and you understand that it's a horror, you'll see that a lot of the same tension-building elements are exactly what drive, the Darkblade story. But at the same time, it's also pretty epic in scope. And it's got the magic, it's got the big world building, all of that. So dark epic fantasy is what I say.
Okay, Doc, there's a comment for you real quick. Ask that question.
That question doesn't make sense.
All right, so normally we would ask later in the show, but since you mentioned...
Right. Here. That's you misspelled here, and it threw me off.
I typed it too fast. Jeez. Everyone's a critic. Like, I have an editor for a reason, all right?
You're so sad.
Moving on.
I love you, but you're so sad. Okay, so how is it that you go about designing your creatures? Is it too much caffeine, too little caffeine, inspired by nature or history?
My creatures, like my monsters? Just kind of whatever would fit the worst or the most ideal thing for the circumstance. So, you're underground in the dark. You don't want to run into a giant spider, right? You're in the forest. The last thing you want is a giant wolf. Now, if you're in a cave in a forest, well, you find something that's kind of a creepy combination of both. So it's just like whatever would be the most appropriate for the theme of the story. Let's say the character is someone who, he sees the enemy as very like a serpentine, right? He's sneaky, slippery, cunning. So he kind of has you setting up this thing of hatred for those kind of things. So you don't pit him against a wolf, which is this more savage, bestial thing. You pit him against some kind of creepy, crawly monster that will really trigger that disgust for that personality type. It kind of plays into that.
So how much sentience or agency do you give to your creatures when you write them? Are they just mindless machines or?
So actually, I don't really have that many creatures. Like the demons in this one, they're basically the demons from the Warcraft universe in the sense that they are weird-looking, amoral, violent, vicious humanoids from another world. And these people, they don't understand that this, they don't understand the idea of alternate galaxies or alternate dimensions or parallel worlds through portals or whatever it is. So they look at them, they see horns, they see hooves, they see fangs, they see tails. They're like, demon, right? Easy. But it's kind of fun to explore the way that the demons, the so-called demons, they actually have a morality scale that actually interlaps with humans, but it's also a lot less, a lot more amoral. They're a lot more willing to just do violence. It's more their way of life. So it's kind of a fun thing. They're basically humanoid with full intelligence or even more intelligence.
So I can definitely see them looking at somebody and going, dude, that's messed up. And I'm a demon saying that.
100%. I actually have that point in one of my books where the demon's like, wait, you're coming at me? This human person is a serial killer and you're coming at me? What's up with that?
Yeah, totally think that's awesome.
Do you incorporate a little bit of snark and sass into the stories or do you play it straight?
A bit of both depending on the character. There's always some quirky, funny, weird, oddball characters. This character, this assassin, is 100% the straight man. You know, stuff happens around him. He can have some funny sort of happen to him, but he doesn't really crack a joke. Or if he does, it's a very Geralt of Rivia kind of joke where it's like a little grunting laugh, and it's really, really short one-liner joke. But there's a lot of sort of weird people around him who are just quirky and so much fun.
So when you talked about the weirdness and the quirkiness, you basically described Doc. So she is smiling because she feels happy now that she was noticed. So we appreciate that.
Absolutely.
I'm the one who thinks of the comeback or the quip was perfect for that situation like 2 months later.
Yeah.
Oh, if I'd only said this.
If it makes you feel any better, JR, I'm the person who goes, wait, I was getting hit on? And it's normally it happened at a convention and it's 2 months later. And of course, because it happened at the convention, the guy doesn't live anywhere near here.
Fair. That's fair. So now let's talk about the story itself more than we already have. But can you tell us, is there anything else about the main character that you haven't told us that you think, the audience would want to know to make them fall in love with him so they can read the book?
He, on the face of him, he is a cold, brutal killer, right? I mean, he's half demon. He's the bad guy. Every assassin, every cursed dagger wielding person, and every demonic thing, they're always the bad guys in every single book ever. Classic fantasy. But this guy is someone that actually you can really kind of understand and relate to and empathize with. So in the first scene, he just chops his way through a bunch of people just to kind of have some fun and set the tone for the bloody. And then in the second scene, he goes and he frees these women who have been trafficked into the city, and he gives them money. And then he goes on and he does more and more things throughout the whole series that kind of slowly endears him to you. I always get those two wrong. I hope I got that right.
Close enough. I mean, we've been drinking, so
There you go. And so like he starts off as this really dark, grim character, but over the course of the first book, you can't help but fall in love with sort of the humanity of this non-human character.
Okay. So speaking of characters, what about secondary characters? Everybody loves a good secondary character. So do you have a favorite in your universe? Obviously.
A secondary character that's, I have so many that I love. There's some really fun, kooky ones in my Night Guild series. Like I wrote this one character for a reader who'd been super, super helpful in like editing the first book. And I'm like, I want to thank you by writing in a character. What would you like me to write? So she's like, I want you to write a crazy cat lady. So I wrote a crazy cat lady, but instead of a cat, she has this little like miniature lemur kind of character that just like bounces around her laboratory, and she's an alchemist. So you can imagine that this little creature is just causing all kinds of chaos. And this woman was the most fun character I have ever written.
I need to go read this book.
Yeah, I think I'm going to have to spend my November credits and get the audiobook.
Okay, but I am a chemist, so in chemistry is basically modern alchemy.
Oh, 100%. That's the beauty of using alchemy. It's the fantasy version of Handwavium.
Fair. So now we get to ask my favorite question: the sight of darkness in every universe. Tell us about the bad guys, without spoilers, obviously, because sometimes knowing who the bad guy is a spoiler. But what is the bad guy in this universe?
That's such a tough question because there's so many different flavors of bad guy. And so I actually got this tattoo on my arm. It's sort of the motto for the world.
Give me just a second. I'll put you on the solo screen for a second.
There you go.
Right, I can see it.
Let's see if I can get it closer. Apologize for all the hair. It says, there is no evil, only desire and what you will do to obtain it.
Oh.
So the whole evilness of the world is just people basically doing whatever it takes to achieve their ultimate end. So maybe one person just wants to be powerful. One person wants to protect their family. One person is fucked up in the brain and they just want to kill people. I don't know. I apologize if I'm swearing too much on this thing.
You're fine. We have veterans on this podcast.
I've heard family friendly thrown around, so.
I mean, family-ish. A military family is a little bit different than a normie family.
There you go. Okay.
Yeah. No. We've only had one who, Casey, whoever made us not label it not safe for work.
Okay, good.
So
all I'm saying is June Cleaver would be blushing at our conversation. Ward, Leave It to Beaver.
Yeah.
Jeez, Doc, it's like you were raised in a barn or something.
I read books.
Do they have books in that? I don't know. I'm going to look that up, and if they have
I
books,
was
I'm going to be
also
like,
in the
"That's no excuse."
sandbox, so leave me alone.
Fair. They might not have been watching Leave It to Beaver, but
We
all right.
had one channel that aired English TV. Leave me alone.
All right, Doc, ask him about dark alleys and fighting. We're going to get back on track. We
Okay,
can
so
do
your
this.
character found you in the back dark alley and knew that you were the author, literally, of all that happened to them. How do you think you'd fare?
The question is, how many seconds do you think I would survive? And the answer is 2.
Okay.
Because poor bastard goes through some horrible, horrible things, and that's just in book 1. Like, basically, when I rewrote the series, I rebooted, I restructured a lot of the story, but I kept in all the really, really like dark, gut-wrenching, painful elements, and then I found a way to double down on all of them. And I wrote in extra characters to kill off in horrible, horrible ways with these deep emotional ties to the main character, and then continued to add more and more and more of them to where this guy, if he was not superhuman in the sense that he's got, impossible stamina, speed, strength, and then, healing ability, he would have broken 1,000 times over with just the horrible, horrible things he goes through.
Oh, wow.
And on that cheery note,
I feel a little bad for this character.
But I will say that it always ends with a hopeful note. It's not grimdark. That's actually why I specifically didn't say grimdark, is because it doesn't end with the world is terrible and everything is terrible and always will be. It's the world is terrible, but there's this little tiny glimmer of hope. So maybe things aren't going to be as bad as they are now.
That's the one thing I didn't like.
This world speaks to my soul.
That's the one thing I didn't like about Joanne McCrombie, and I read the Nine Finger series. I can't remember the name of the
First Law.
And it did a book club and we read it. And it's like, I liked the fantasy part of it. I liked the fighting, but I didn't like any of the characters. Like, there was no one to root for. Even the good guys were bad guys.
Yeah.
And so I don't mind grimdark, but it's got to have that side of hopefulness.
But then it's not grimdark.
You don't think?
That's the whole flavor of grimdark, is that it's just dark and it just gets darker. And no matter what happens, it will always be dark.
So I thought grimdark was, and this might be another fireside chat, Doc, scribble this down, but I thought grimdark was much like steampunk, and it was just an aesthetic, not necessarily a trope.
It is an aesthetic in the sense that the world is very gray. It's very dull. It's dark. It's war-torn, or the aftermath of a war. You get a lot of mud. You get a lot of rain. You get seedy alleys. What was it? The Dripping Bucket. Every single grimdark world has to have a tavern named the Dripping Bucket. And characters that are very, very amoral. The gods are absent. We actually did a podcast on dissecting grimdark. Super fascinating.
Where's this podcast? Can you link it in the after the show? We'll link it in the show notes so they can listen.
For sure. Yeah.
All right.
That
saves us from spending another hour.
It's basically this hopelessness that permeates the whole story. You can have characters who are hopeful, but at the end of the day, their hopefulness is shattered, and it's just sort of grimdark. Like, if you read the end of the First Law or the end of the second trilogy, Age of Madness, you'll know exactly what I mean by the grimdark vibe. Just the ending. It's a satisfying ending, and yet you walk away feeling, ugh.
Okay.
I don't think I could do grimdark.
So since we talked about characters some, and you getting slaughtered in a back alley, when you write, your process is a little different than many of the authors that we've interviewed. So do you have a favorite archetype when you're planning?
I always plan out the character archetype beforehand. So, for example, with my military fantasy series, I sat down and I thought about who each of these 7 characters in the company will be. Not only what purpose they fulfill, the messenger, the medic, the scout, the sniper, all of that, but then also what kind of people they would be, whether they were the shield or the heart, or they were the sassy character, or the quiet reticent. I always know what kind of characters they are. And then of course they evolve and they grow as I'm writing them, but I have this idea beforehand so I can just kind of lean into it and make them more so.
Okay. So this is clearly part of a series. We know because you've said so. Amazon says so. Bezos has said so. Bezos is never wrong. He's the oracle of all things knowable and
Oh my
lovable.
God, Derek! Seriously, is he giving you a reach around?
Sorry, it's so fun to get her going. All right, this is a series. There's 3 books out, but is their story done? What more can we expect besides apparently a reach around? Doc, there goes our family-friendly rating.
Absolutely.
You killed
Dude,
it.
that's fine. That's still fine. My son has no idea what that means.
That's
All
true.
right, but so where is the series going, do you think?
So right now, the book 3, which is going to be released tentatively in early 2022, is the 75% mark of the first story arc. Book 4 will close the first story arc. After that, I have a second story arc, which is going to take 5 or 6 books to wrap up because of the complexity of the material. We're talking, continent-wide holy war. We're talking, battle of faiths. We're talking massive full-scale invasion, casualties in the hundreds of thousands. Like this is ramping up to be big, but it's taking time because it's all from one character's perspective. So it's got to be layered and done, and of course he's got some serious complexity in terms of emotional development that we're going to have to get through. So at the end of the day, this series is going to be probably 2 to 2.5 million words, 10 or 11 books.
Okay. So we all know that so you've basically set this up as a stereotypical sort of fantasy proto-European type environment, right? So
Yeah.
You're not having like technology. So what sort of so we can presume swords, spears, that kind of thing. So what kind of magic instead does this universe have aside from, demons that talk in your head?
So there is a certain degree of magic that is not understood because it's all science, right? Everything magical is science done. So in fact, my military sci-fi series is set in the same universe. In book 2, he flies over this planet and they can't land because of volatile and unpredictable energy readings. So that kind of explains how that they're everything connected. So there's these alien beings that they see as sort of these ancient creatures of wisdom and power, sort of like the elves, but aliens. And a lot of what's left in the magic is their technology. So anytime I want to introduce magic, I just have to figure out a technological way to make it work. Don't show any of that, but do that into the story, and then I can do it. So it's really, really fun because there are no limits, because it's all sci-fi technology. This alien race is, tens, 20, 30,000, 100,000 years more advanced than these primitive humans, but it's all behind the scenes as quote unquote magic. So literally anything I want. Right now there's magic weapons. There's, in the last book, there's this stone that actually like shifts, sort of like, what's that stuff called? The ferrofluid, where it's actually magnetically charged and it activates and it like consumes the body of this young man as he's, dead dude, and like drags him down into the stone. And like, it's really, really fun because I can kind of do anything.
So of all the stuff that you're doing, what is the one thing you'd want to take and use for daily use?
Oh, that's tough. Alchemical stuff. I have so much fun with alchemy because, again, you can make up some names of cool plants and just drop it in there. So I've the hunter, he has this supplier of alchemical supplies, and he's just like, give me this and give me that and give me that, and it's so much fun.
Awesome. So how would you abuse that?
Oh, in every single way possible. The alchemist makes this love potion that makes the person break out in heart-shaped spots and then forget where they got the potion from. And it doesn't actually work for them to fall in love. So it's just sort of like a punishment for being stupid enough to want. So just like prank level awesomeness using alchemy.
That sounds amazing. So do you see the aliens in this? Since you said like it's, you have basically super advanced. And how did you go about designing them for the series?
So you do see them. You see first their buildings, the buildings they built. It's very fantasy structures. The big spire towers and bridges and all kinds of cool stuff, which makes sense to a fantasy person. But then ultimately you get to see statues of what these people look like, and then you actually get to have like a vision where he communes with them, whether it's telepathically or digitally or whatever it is. So you do actually get to see them.
So how did you go about designing them? Did you let nature inspire this, or did you just kind of go, well, they have to be tall because their buildings are tall?
It's kind of like what are some features that are connected to humanity but are alien enough. So there's this the fear of zombies that we humans have is because the known becomes unknown. This person that we are familiar with, their face, we know them, we love them, and all of a sudden they're trying to eat us. So it's more terrifying than this monster that we can't quantify. So I basically leaned into that, and I took things that were normal, like let's say human joints, and tweaked them. So there's, instead of one elbow joint, there's 2 elbow joints and 3 wrist joints. And that looks creepy and weird. And then these things, you know, with like humanoid skulls, but the skull is shaped wrong. And it's just basically doing that, just taking something familiar and making it unfamiliar, a little bit scary, a little bit horrific, but more alien and exotic.
Every time you say alchemy, I'm thinking of that series that I listened to back, I guess last year, The Discovery of Witches, because it was all like the whole series was predicated on the concept of alchemy. Yeah. So how deep into that did you go? Did you just use that as sort of your handwavium, or did you actually dive into some of the practices?
So there's plenty of handwavium. I'd say 75% of it is handwavium. I did use some alchemical symbology, pagan symbology in the structure of the world. I do some research, like if I want to create this, you know, this potion, right, that's killing people, a poison. I do research whether it's viral or bacterial or whether it's an actual poison / venom. I do research so I have an understanding of the mechanisms behind these things, and then I make up my own version of them.
Okay. So you understand the rules just enough so you know how to break them.
Exactly.
Okay. Now, if you had the alchemy powers in real life, how would you abuse them?
Well, I think just a lot of really, really awesome pranks against people who would have no way of knowing it's me, because I'm a total prankster at heart. And I don't mean like cruel pranks like you see on those, you know, those YouTube videos or whatever. I just mean like funny pranks.
Okay. That's the most honest answer we've given. So are you going to introduce things like lightsabers because if it's technology you can get away with, like, you know, laser swords in a fantasy world? Or are you going to try to keep the skin of fantasy on the world?
So it's all going to be, it's going to be skinned as fantasy, but like in the 4th book, Savior, you see guns, but they're called Scorch Slayers. You know, the word means nothing. They shoot lightning bolts, which could be blasters, or it could be, you know, plasma fire. It could be anything. But it's called this magical sounding name, and it's based on the technology of these ancient peoples that use magic. So it's all skinned as fantasy. So I can kind of get away with anything that way. It's fun.
Nice. So clearly we're at an hour and 12 minutes. We're winding this down, but was there anything about Assassin or the Darkblade series that we didn't ask that you have to tell us before we move on?
I mean, we're looking at 2 million words. There's a lot of things that you didn't ask.
This is true, and I could gab forever. Like, we could be talking to the wee hours of the night, but Doc's like, I got a day job. My boss wants me to be awake when I play with chemicals. I don't know what that's about.
I spilled HCl on my hand this morning, and it barely tingled. I'm not sure if it's just that I was not awake. I know that the HCl was perfectly fine, so it was not the chemical's fault.
For those who aren't as smart as us, who don't know what HCl is, could you tell them
hydrochloric acid?
Oh, yeah. I totally knew that. Like, yeah,
hydrochloric acid is a strong acid. It completely disassociates in water.
Okay. So that's bad if it spills on you, in theory.
Well, I mean, it didn't even tingle. I'd rather have that than the hydrogen peroxide on me. So.
All right. So.
But our hydrogen peroxide, you know, that tingly feeling you get from like the 3%? Our hydrogen peroxide is a lot more than 3%.
So clearly we've got to wrap this up, because otherwise, if we don't, you're going to see in the news this giant chemical fireball from Atlanta, and they're going to be like, oh, JR kept her awake too late. It'll be bad. So we're going to have to start winding this down. Doc, stop making those faces. All right. So before we let you go, dear listener, let me remind you that your thoughts matter too. I assume you're here because you like to read the words. So your reviews have the right... Yes.
Maybe they just like it when I abuse you.
Maybe.
That could be a poll.
It probably is the torture aspect. I get that. So your reviews help the right readers find the right books. So please be kind and speak your mind on the reviewing platforms. And I have said it once and I will say it again. Even bad reviews can help you find the right books. I have seen books that were slaughtered as having too much cussing. And I'm like, dude, sign me up. I had another one that was like, this was written by a 12-year-old with ADHD who talked about guns. And I'm like, I'm there. So your reviews matter. Because I'm so mature. Doc, you stop that. I'm totally mature.
One of my best ads is a review. It's a 3-star review. The guy is just blasting it, and I'm like, I love this, and it's my ad.
I actually was going to do that. The 12-year-old writing with ADHD writing gun porn was actually a review of the Sleeping Legion, but in the purges that happened of the reviews on Amazon, I lost it. I'm like, no, that's the one I wanted you to keep. And I didn't think to screen grab it because I wasn't planning ahead. I was still a rookie. But yeah, I just thought that was funny. I think sometimes reviews can sell a book because if you're telling why you didn't like something, that might be someone else's what they do like. Unless you are Scott Moon, and he got a bad review that said these are not the Jimmy Dean sausages I ordered. So we're sorry, whoever you are, sir, that you didn't get your sausage. That is a big deal, and we apologize on behalf of Bezos and all his holiness. She doesn't even take the bait anymore. We know it's time to wrap this up. All right. So before we let you go, can you tell listeners and viewers how they can find you, Andy?
Yeah. So you just Google my very French Canadian name, Peloquin, or so I don't sound like a douchebag, Peloquin. Just Google that, Andy Peloquin, and you'll find me on my website.com, Facebook, Amazon. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
And as usual, dear listener, it will be in the show notes. And you can find us on our website at anchor.fm/blasters-and-blades. Again, that's anchor.fm/blasters-and-blades. We're on the Twitters at SF_fantasy_show, Sierra Foxtrot_fantasy_show. Hey, Doc, do you want to tell the ones in the back what SF stands for?
Sci-fi.
Woohoo! She's awake. You can email the show at blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. Again, that's blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. You can send hate mail to Doc Cisca at blastersandbladespodcast.com. We have a Facebook group where all the shenanigans happen, and we convinced Doc that she is wrong on her holy quest to put pineapples on our sacred pizza. That is
nobody has convinced me. Most people agree with me.
Well, they're all clearly part of this plot. I know probably Andy is too. Are you one of those?
I am not.
All right, you get to stay then. All right, I mean, it's over.
Canadian, so he doesn't believe in anything offensive.
Well, what if we talked bad about maple syrup? That might get him going.
Well, that's just downright rude, eh?
Okay. So you can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/Blasters and Blades Podcast. Again, /groups/Blasters and Blades Podcast. You can support the show on a reoccurring monthly basis over at anchor.fm/blasters-and-blades. For as little as 99 cents a month, you help keep the lights on, or you can do a one-time donation at buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Again, buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Be sure to put in the comment section that it is for the podcast, and I will keep Doc Cisca and Nick Garber duly intoxicated. They will drink until their liver surrenders.
Never surrender.
That's right. All right, bring us home, Doc.
Thank you for spending. What?
Hold on. Are you gonna let them know the secret you told us before the show about what went in your hot chocolate?
Bourbon and marshmallows.
Yeah, I want some of that now. See, she's been teasing me the whole show, sending me pictures of the bourbon. Oh. All right, bring it home.
No, so it's the one that I got that I wanted to name the show after, Blade and Bow.
Yeah, they cease and desist letters. Lawyers got involved.
They did not do a cease and desist letter. God,
you're ruining my joke with facts and reality.
Rumors.
Stop. You're ruining my joke with facts and reality. I don't like this.
No, you're ruining.
Andy's like, I'm never coming back. These guys are insane.
Little bit, but that's why we're here, right?
Yeah.
It's entertaining apparently for some. Thank you for spending some of your precious time with us. For the absentee Nick Garber, who seems to think Star Wars is a sci-fi, he's wrong. J.R. Handley, I'm Cisca. This was the Blasters and Blades podcast. We'll be back next week at the same time, where we'll indulge our love of nerd culture, torturing J.R., cheesy jokes, all things that go boom, and booze.
And booze. And with that, we're out.